The Queen described the loss of the Duke of Edinburgh as having left a huge void in her life, their son Prince Andrew revealed today. The Duke of York, 61, was speaking about the loss of his father outside the Royal Chapel of All Saints at the Royal Lodge, Windsor, this afternoon after attending a service with the Earl and Countess of Wessex and their daughter Lady Louise. Prince Andrew said the Queen, 94, is an incredibly stoic person, but said Philip's death had left her grieving, and she is feeling it more than anyone. He said, "She described his passing as a miracle and she's contemplating, I think is the way that I would put it." She described it as having left a huge void in her life, but we, the family, the ones that are close, are rallying round to make sure that we're there to support her. The Queen is understood to have attended the private mass in Windsor Castle, and was later spotted arriving at Windsor Castle, after taking her pet corgis out for a walk. Along with the rest of the royal family, they are currently in a 2-week mourning period, and will only carry out engagements if appropriate. In paying tribute to his father in front of the cameras at Windsor, Prince Andrew is thought to have been speaking in public for the first time since his disastrous Newsnight interview in 2019 about his friendship with convicted billionaire paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. He stepped down from public duties shortly after the car crash showdown with Emily Maitlis. He added of his father today, "He was a remarkable man. I loved him as a father.He was so calm. He was always someone you could go to. We have lost the grandfather of the nation." The Queen is thinking of others before herself, the Countess of Wessex said as she left the church service. Addressing a mourner, Sophie added, "You know it's going to happen, but when it happens it's just this massive hole." Speaking of her father-in-law's last moments, she added, "It was so gentle.It was just like somebody took him by the hand, and off he went." "It was very peaceful, and that's all you want for somebody, isn't it? I think it's so much easier for the person that goes than the people that are left behind." "We're all sitting here, looking at each other going, this is awful." She said the tributes left by the public have been amazing, but claimed COVID is preventing people from doing what they naturally want to do, which is coming together, which is hard. Prince Edward, Philip and the Queen's youngest son, added, "It's been a bit of a shock. However much one tries to prepare oneself for something like this, it's still a dreadful shock. And we're still trying to come to terms with that.And. It's very sad. But I have to say that the extraordinary tribute and the memories that everybody has had and been willing to share has been so fantastic." And it just goes to show, he might have been our father, grandfather, father-in-law, but he meant so much to so many other people. The Earl of Wessex also said his heart goes out to all those who worked at royal residences, who will feel a very personal loss after the Duke of Edinburgh's death. Speaking outside the Royal Chapel of All Saints at Royal Lodge, Windsor, Edward said, "He means so much to so many people here, and it's the same for those who lived and worked at Balmoral and Sandringham. For all those past and present," he said, "they've all had their own personal memories and stories." Our hearts go out to all of them as well. Prince Philip died peacefully in his sleep at Windsor Castle on Friday, 2 months before his 100th birthday, leaving the Queen and the royal family mourning his loss. The Duke of York also said today, "It's a terrible loss. My father said to me on the telephone a few months ago, we are all in the same boat, and we must always remember that, but occasionally we, the family, are asked to stand up and show compassion and leadership." And unfortunately, with my father's death, it has brought it home to me, not just our loss, but actually the loss that everybody else has felt for so many people who have died and lost loved ones during the pandemic. And so, we are all in the same boat, slightly different circumstances, because he didn't die from COVID, but we're all feeling a great sense of loss. And the Princess Royal and Philip's only daughter has also released a statement. "You know it's going to happen, but you are never really ready." "My father has been my teacher, my supporter and my critic, but mostly it is his example of a life well lived and service freely given that I most wanted to emulate." His ability to treat every person as an individual in their own right with their own skills comes through all the organizations with which he was involved. "I regard it as an honor and a privilege to have been asked to follow in his footsteps, and it has been a pleasure to have kept him in touch with their activities. I know how much he meant to them, in the UK, across the Commonwealth, and in the wider world." "I would like to emphasize how much the family appreciate the messages and memories of so many people whose lives he also touched. We will miss him, but he leaves a legacy which can inspire us all." Canon Martin Pole, chaplain to Windsor Great Park, greeted Edward, Sophie, their teenage daughter and Andrew before the service today. Looking sombre and reflective, the royal party spoke to workers from the Windsor estate and the congregation when they arrived at All Saints, which the Queen normally attends outside of lockdown. The royals thanked everyone for their support, particularly over the last few days following the Duke's death on Friday. Philip's funeral at St George's Chapel, Windsor Castle, next Saturday will be like no other, with the Queen and her family wearing face masks and socially distancing as they gather to say their final farewell amid coronavirus restrictions. Buckingham Palace announced yesterday that Prince Philip's ceremonial royal funeral will take place on April the 17th at St George's Chapel in Windsor Castle, and a national minute's silence will be observed as it begins at 3 p.m. The funeral service will be broadcast worldwide. The Archbishop of Canterbury also led a solemn remembrance service for Prince Philip at Canterbury Cathedral today. The service started at 10:30 a.m. with Justin Welby paying tribute to the Duke of Edinburgh after his death on Friday morning. It was a small, socially distanced gathering with the Queen represented by Lady Colgrane, the Lord Lieutenant of Kent. Also in attendance was the High Sheriff of Kent, the Lord Mayor of Kent, the Sheriff of Canterbury and the Chief Executive of Canterbury. Edward Elgar's stirring Nimrod was played, the piece of music that accompanies many British funerals and memorial services, and is played annually at the Cenotaph in London to mark the national service of remembrance. In his sermon, the Archbishop said that the Duke of Edinburgh had a remarkable willingness to take the hand he was dealt in life. However, he added that the Duke would have been the first to harp strongly at over-spiritualization of himself. The Reverend Canon Tim Nash spoke after the Archbishop and added, "We pray for all those who mourn Prince Philip's death. We pray for comfort and strength for Elizabeth our Queen." Marking the third of 8 days of national mourning, people also gathered at royal palaces to leave flowers despite calls from the palace and the government to stay away to maintain social distancing guidelines. Paying tribute to the late Duke at the special service today, Mr. Welby said, "It is God who creates, God who calls, and God who sends." For His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh, there was a willingness, a remarkable willingness, to take the hand he was dealt in life, and straightforwardly to follow its call. To search its meaning, to go out and on ascent, to inquire and think, to trust and to pray. He added, "For the royal family, as for every other, no words can reach into the depth of sorrow that goes into bereavement." We all know that it is not simply a factor of age or familiarity. It is not obliterated by the reality of a very long life remarkably led, nor is the predictability of death's arrival a softening of the blow. Loss is loss. The Archbishop urged prayers for the family and others who are grieving. He said, "Our lives are not completed before death, but their eternity is prepared." So we can indeed pray that the Duke of Edinburgh may rest in peace and rise in glory. We may pray for comfort. We may pray and offer love for all who find that a great life leaves a very great gap. For the royal family and the millions who have themselves suffered loss, we can know that the presence of Christ will bring peace, and the light of Christ will shine strongly, and it is in that light that we can strengthen one another with eternal hope. The Duke will be taken to St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle on a Land Rover he helped to design, and will be flanked by pallbearers from the Royal Marines, regiments, corps, and air stations. The decision to carry Philip in the custom-built car comes after he is said to have told the Queen, "Just stick me in the back of a Land Rover and drive me to Windsor." Immediately behind the Land Rover, the Prince of Wales and other members of the family, likely to be the Duke's other children, and some of his grandchildren including Harry and William, will proceed on foot. Prince Harry will travel to the UK to be with his family for the service, but his wife Meghan will remain at their home in California after being advised not to travel by her doctor. Official royal mourning will then take place for 2 weeks after the funeral. Only 30 people expected to be the Duke's children, grandchildren and other close family will attend as guests. Prime Minister Boris Johnson will not be among guests, having stepped aside to allow for the attendance of as many family members as possible during coronavirus restrictions, Number 10 said last night. The Land Rover hearse is a fitting tribute to Philip, the nation's longest consort, who was known for his practical skills and his enduring interest in design and engineering. The purpose-built Land Rover was specially modified to carry a coffin in a project that the Duke helped with many years ago. The vehicle will process slowly through the grounds of Windsor Castle ahead of the funeral, draped in his personal standard, a wreath of flowers and his naval cap and sword. A bearer party from the Grenadier Guards will place the coffin on the Land Rover at the state entrance of the castle, before the vehicle begins the 8-minute journey at walking pace to the west steps of the chapel. It will be flanked by pallbearers reflecting the Duke's special relationships with the military, the Royal Marines, regiments, corps, and air stations. Immediately behind the Land Rover, the Prince of Wales and other members of the royal family, likely to be the Duke's other children and some of his grandchildren, will proceed on foot. The Land Rover's poignant role in the funeral proceedings always formed part of Operation Forth Bridge, the code name given to the plans following Philip's death. A senior palace official said, "The Duke of Edinburgh had a hand many years ago in the design of these vehicles." The official added that there were 2 Land Rovers for belt and braces. The Queen has approved the Prime Minister's recommendation of national mourning, which began on April the 9th and runs until and including the day of the funeral. Originally 800 people would have been due to gather to pay their respects to the nation's longest-serving consort, but Philip is known to have wanted a low-key affair. The first guest confirmed by the palace was the Duke's long-standing close aide, his private secretary Brigadier Archie Miller-Bakewell, who will be one of the few, and possibly only, non-royals invited to attend. Brigadier Miller-Bakewell had been the Duke's right-hand man for 11 years, taking on the role in 2010. And brothers William and Harry are expected to stand shoulder to shoulder as they come together for the first time since Harry's bombshell Oprah interview. All public elements of the funeral have been cancelled, and it will be televised, but take place entirely in the grounds of the castle, the palace said. The Queen has decided the royal family will enter 2 weeks of royal mourning, and engagements will continue appropriate to the circumstances, a senior royal official said. The announcement came as Prince Charles paid a poignant tribute to his father, describing his dear papa as a very special person and their most remarkable, devoted companion to the Queen in an emotional video released this evening. In a moving address and speaking without notes, the Prince of Wales said his father would have been deeply touched by the sorrow felt by millions of people in Britain and across the world at news of his passing. He said he would miss his father enormously, and added that his family were deeply grateful for the condolences offered, which he said would sustain us at this particularly sad time. The Earl and the Countess of Wessex spent a round in awe with the Queen at the castle on Saturday, with a tearful Sophie telling reporters as she left. "The Queen has been amazing. The Duke died peacefully in his sleep at Windsor Castle on Friday, 2 months before his 100th birthday, leaving the Queen and the royal family mourning his loss. The Duke of York arrived at Windsor on Saturday, while the Prince of Wales visited his mother there on Friday. Princess Anne left Windsor Castle accompanied by her husband and son Peter Phillips, after visiting her mother this afternoon. Gun salutes have been fired across the UK, in Gibraltar and at sea in tribute to the Duke. Public elements of Operation Fourth Bridge, the code name for the Duke's funeral plans, were abandoned for fear of drawing crowds, including the long-held arrangements for military processions through London and Windsor. Instead, the proceedings will take place entirely in the grounds of Windsor Castle, televised, but away from public view, and with no access for royal fans. A statement on the official royal family Twitter page this evening read, "The plans for the funeral are in line with His Royal Highness' own personal wishes." The occasion will recognise and celebrate the Duke's life and more than 70 years of service to the Queen, the UK and the Commonwealth. Confirming that the PM would not be in attendance, a Number 10 spokesperson said, "As a result of the coronavirus regulations, only 30 people can attend the funeral of H.R.H. the Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh." The Prime Minister has throughout wanted to act in accordance with what is best for the royal household, and so to allow for as many family members as possible will not be attending the funeral on Saturday. The English Football League has also announced that all matches scheduled for 3 p.m. next Saturday will be moved to avoid clashing with Prince Philip's funeral. There are 32 games across the Championship, League One and League Two, that were set to get underway at 3 p.m. on the day of the funeral. On the day of the funeral, the Duke's coffin, accompanied by the Dean of Windsor and the Lord Chamberlain, will be moved to the state entrance of Windsor Castle by a bearer party of the Queen's Company, 1st Battalion Grenadier Guards. On the grass in the castle's quadrangle will be representative detachments drawn from Philip's military special relationships. The quadrangle will also be lined by the household cavalry and the foot guards.The band of the Grenadier Guards, of which Philip was colonel for 42 years, will lead the procession to St. George's Chapel. They will be followed by the Major General's party, and then the service chiefs, reflecting His Royal Highness' close relationship with the military. The procession from the state entrance to the west steps of St. George's Chapel will take 8 minutes. The route of the procession will be lined by representatives drawn from the Royal Navy, the Royal Marines, the Highlanders, 4th Battalion Royal Regiment of Scotland in the Royal Air Force. Minute guns will be fired by the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery from the east lawn of Windsor Castle for the duration of the procession, and the curfew tower bell will toll. A guard of honour and band from the Rifles will receive the coffin at the foot of the west steps, with the national anthem being played as the coffin enters Horseshoe Cloister. In tribute to Philip's naval service, a Royal Naval piping party of 1 chief petty officer and 5 ratings will be present. The piping party will pipe a still once the Land Rover is stationary at the foot of the steps. A bearing party of Royal Marines will carry the coffin up the steps and pause for the minute's silence. The Archbishop of Canterbury and the Dean of Windsor will then receive the coffin. In keeping with coronavirus guidelines to limit guests inside the chapel, most of the procession will not enter St. George's, except for members of the royal family and the Duke's private secretary Archie Miller-Bakewell. Following his funeral, the Duke of Edinburgh will be privately interred in the Royal Vault of St. George's Chapel, but this will not be his final resting place. When the Queen dies, Philip will be transferred to the Gothic Church's King George.V Memorial Chapel to lie alongside his devoted wife of 73 years. The tiny chapel houses the remains of the Queen's father George.V, her mother the Queen Mother and sister Princess Margaret. The central feature of the pale stone annex, which was added onto the north side of St. George's behind the north choir aisle in 1969, is a black stone slab set into the floor. It is inscribed with George.V and Elizabeth in gold lettering, and accompanied by their years of birth and death. On Saturday, the Queen and close members of her family will gather privately after the funeral as the Duke's coffin is interred in the Royal Vault, a burial place set beneath St. George's Chapel for the time being. It will be placed on a marble slab in the choir and lowered into the vault by electric motor. The Royal Vault at Windsor was created between 1804 and 1810 for George III, who died in 1820, and is one of 3 kings buried there. Also interred in the vault are George IV and William IV. Others buried there include George II's wife Queen Charlotte and their daughter Princess Amelia, George IV's daughter Princess Charlotte and Queen Victoria's father the Duke of Kent. Princess Margaret, who died in 2002, was cremated and her ashes were initially placed in the Royal Vault, before being moved to the George V Memorial Chapel with her parents' coffins, when the Queen Mother died just weeks later. The princess wanted to be cremated because she found the alternative royal burial ground at Frogmore in Windsor Great Park too gloomy. Lady Glenconnor, a lifelong friend of the princess, said in 2002 that the princess preferred the memorial chapel instead. She told me that she found Frogmore very gloomy, Lady Glenconnor said. I think she'd like to be with the late king, which she will now be. There's room I think for her to be with him now. George V died in 1952, but was first interred in the Royal Vault and moved to the Memorial Chapel when it was built 17 years later.